What's up? Listen, in this video, I want to share with you the top 5 books that have impacted my life the most. All right, let's go. Well, hey, check this out, man. Years ago, I came across a couple of quotes by Jim Rohn that just really revolutionized my perspective on the subject of self-improvement. I want you to catch it. The first quote went something like this: work harder on yourself than you do on your job. That caused me to realize and recognize, man, one of the most important investments I could ever make is the investment I make in myself. And what I begin to see, like in culture, and I think it's easy for any of us to get caught up in this. What I begin to see in culture is that it's very easy to make investments on ourselves, right? But it takes more intentionality to make one of the most important investments we can make, and that's the investment we make in ourselves. So he says, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. And the second thing he says is this. He says, don't wish it were easier. Wish you were better. And so I just think both of those quotes point to the importance of improvement, self-improvement. And one of the pathways to self-improvement is learning. And one of the ways you can learn is through reading. There used to be this saying, leaders are readers. I kind of partly agree. Leaders are learners. Whatever vehicle is the best vehicle for you to get it, that's the vehicle you need to use to get it in. But for me, for a large part, a lot of my quest for self-improvement has come through books. And I want to share with you the top 5 books that have impacted my life. Now, these top 5 are not necessarily in any specific order, but they are, I think, unequivocally top 5. Now, there are some others that are honorable mention, and maybe I'll do like a second top 5 later, but top 5 is right here. Here we go. All right. Number 1, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by a guy named Peter Scazzero. Absolutely, unequivocally game-changing for me. So one of the things that it helped me see was the connection between spiritual maturity and emotional health. Now watch this. Not just the emotional intelligence, which deals primarily with like self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management. So it's awareness and management. Whereas I think when it comes to so that's intelligence. But when it comes to the issue of health, it's not just how can I manage this thing? It's where did this thing come from? And how can I address this thing so I'm not having to always manage this thing for the rest of my life? And so anyway, man, one of the things that he says is this: you can't increase in spiritual maturity without increasing in emotional health. And that part of the evidence of actually your spiritual growth, and I think many people confuse spiritual growth between spiritual knowledge. They're not the same thing. Like, so just because a person has a reservoir of information doesn't mean they're doing any application of that information, right? So you can have a head full of stuff you never use. And so the point that I'm making is this, is that even when you look at like the evidence of the Spirit's work in a person's life, it's called the fruit of the Spirit, right? Well, much of what you see in the fruit of the Spirit speaks to the impact that a person's spirituality has on their emotional life, like joy and peace, temperance, which is self-control. So that book, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, undoubtedly is one of the ones that really, really impacted me the most. I think it had tremendous impact on my family, and definitely has had tremendous impact on those that I lead and serve. So number 1, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by a guy named Peter Scazzero. Here's number 2. Number 2 is a book called Boundaries by a guy named Dr. Henry Cloud. This was also a game changer for me. So he in this book, he paints this amazing picture of a fence. He's literally saying, hey, I want you to envision yourself being in your yard and you see a fence, right? And you see stuff growing up on the other side of someone else's fence. Weeds, trees, just terrible, right? So he's like, the fence is the boundary. The fence delineates what you are and what you are not responsible for. And so living without boundaries means you can end up living your life unintentionally being responsible for somebody else's irresponsibility. Oh, it was such a game changer for me. Now, this is what's powerful about boundaries. Like, boundaries are not intended to be an attack on a person. Boundaries are simply the way you advocate for yourself. Just because you're advocating for you doesn't mean you're attacking them. And boundaries isn't always about protecting yourself from another person in a relationship. Sometimes boundaries are actually the way you protect the relationship. Sometimes it gets to the point where it's like, if I don't set a boundary, then one of the things that's going to happen is there's going to be so much toxicity and bitterness and resentment in the relationship that we may not be able to have any kind of relationship at all at some point. Very powerful. Now, here's one of the things that he did. It's some exegetical work that he did, drawing out exegesis, drawing out something of scripture that he did in the book of Galatians, where Paul says, bear you one another's burdens, but let each person carry his own load. And what he talks about is the difference between the two words there. Bear you one another's burdens, let each one of you carry his own load. Those two statements seem contradictory, right? It seems like one is saying help each other out, then another saying let everybody carry their own weight. But when you look at the words there, let each one of you bear his own burdens, bear you one another's burdens. He says the word for that is boulder, like it's translated like a big boulder, a big rock that someone can't carry on their own. But let each one carry his own load. He says that's a backpack. So this is what he's saying. So he said, when someone is carrying something that they can't carry on their own, then you got obligation, responsibility to help. Well, you have a responsibility to help that person. He says, but what you're supposed to do, you set a boundary in the sense that, okay, you help people with what they can't do. You're not responsible for what they won't do. Very, very powerful book, Boundaries by Henry Cloud. All right, number 3 was this. This is a relationship book, and by far one of the most practical, best relationship books I've ever read, hands down in my life. It's not even close, ladies and gentlemen. It's not even close. Now, this is about romantic relationships. I wrote a book on relationships, not romantic relationships, but a book called Relational Intelligence, and this book is way better than my book. But anyway, it's called His Needs, Her Needs. Oh my goodness, by William Harley. Now, this is what's amazing about this book. He breaks down this idea, this concept of something called a love bank. So this is what he says. Every interaction that a person has with each other is either making a positive deposit or a negative withdrawal. He says there's no such thing as a neutral interaction. And so he says those interactions that are positive make deposits in the love bank. Those interactions that are negative make withdrawals from the love bank. And he says the feeling of being in love is actually a feeling that you get when your love bank is overflowing. It's not just the newness of a relationship that causes those feelings. When people are in the infancy stage of relationships, they're doing things that actually fills each other's love banks. They're talking to each other, they're listening to each other, they're paying attention to each other, they're spending time with each other, and those things fill the love bank. And so it's really a practical guide to kind of restore romantic love back in relationships. And it was a game changer for my wife and I, and I know it's been a blessing to so many couples around the world. His Needs, Her Needs by William Harley. All right, and here is another one. This one is called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. John and Mark Comer. This is crazy. Like this book, cray. This is what the guy says. He says, Jesus was busy, but he was never hurried. So even if you're watching this, you're like, oh, I'm not religious. Here's why you need to take Jesus into consideration. Whether you're religious or not, by far, he is the most consequential human in history, right? Just a fact. Anyway, so anybody that had the kind of impact on the world that he did is somebody everybody should be learning from and following. This is what John says. He says, Jesus was busy, but he was never hurried. So powerful. Everywhere he went, he walked, he didn't run. And so when he's talking about hurry, he's not talking about how fast you walk literally. He's talking about a pace of life. And this is what he says. Hurry is an act of violence against your soul. Soul, mind, will, emotions, imagination. It's just anxiety and always in a rush, and there's no margin, and the kids are in soccer, and the kids are in ballet, and the kids are in painting, and the kids are in lacrosse, and the kids in tap dance, and you just hurry. And this is what he says. He says, love has a speed and hurry is not it. Because here's what I think we all have to ask ourselves. When are we at our best? It's not when we're hurried. When we're hurried, we're irritable. Sometimes we're inconsiderate. Sometimes we're impatient. And so he talks about, biblically and theologically, how to ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Because when hurry goes down, happiness comes up. Great book. And last but not least, this is number 5. This was going to be a little controversial. And how can I say this? Yeah, you have a right to your perspective. I have a right to mine on this. So when it comes to information, this is what I believe. I believe all information, I think all truth is God's truth. So what does that mean? It means that the word of God for me determines what is true, right? But there is truth that sometimes comes from people who believe differently than I do spiritually or religiously. So there's this book written by a rabbi, and he's a controversial figure, and I've got some strong disagreements with him in certain areas. But this book not about that. I mean, this video not about that. This video is about a book that he wrote that helped me, right? So, it's almost like reading a book on dieting by somebody. You're not asking, oh, what does this person believe about pneumatology? So anyway, the book is called Thou Shalt Prosper. And it was so revolutionary for me because I think there's a lot of focus now on something like called the prosperity gospel and movement. I think something that was like equally as dangerous is what I had, and that was a poverty mentality. And this book helped me see where that came from and how my misunderstanding of Christianity actually influenced that, and how like the Greco-Roman influence on Christianity and philosophies like something called Gnosticism really caused us to like shy away from. So it's almost like any attempt to acquire resources that would enable you to generously to take care of those that you're responsible for and be generous, not just to the least of these, but also generous to those that you love, was almost like seen as greed and mammon and etc. So he just broke down some mindset stuff for me that was really, really key, really, really essential. And it revolutionized my perspective on money. It didn't tell me how to get any. It didn't tell me how to make any. I figured that out later, but it did the mindset work that was necessary for me. Game changer. Really changed the game for me. So those are the top 5 books, guys, that rocked my world. Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, Boundaries, His Needs, Her Needs, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and Thou Shalt Prosper. All right. Hope this helped. Maybe one of those books will help you in a major way. Take care.